This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, our class today is on thread velvet, as you may have seen from your handouts. And my camera was being a little cranky, not wanting to stay where I put it. So if it suddenly you see a picture of the floor, I apologize. But it is just being crabby today. So this is one sample of some thread velvet that we had done. We did a class 2 years ago in July on thread velvet as a technique class. And this is one of the projects that was in that class. And if you're not familiar with thread velvet, if you can see that these embroideries stand up from the surface of the fabric. To where you can see that easily. There, what it is that you're stitching many layers of thread over each other and not necessarily the same color. And on this particular one, you're seeing there's like a lighter color on the edge here, and then a darker color in the middle. And that's all stitched out as satin stitches. And then you cut down through those threads, and it does what they call bloom. The threads, when you cut them, it doesn't immediately separate and bloom, but you can hold your steam iron above it and it will encourage it to open up and make a velvet-like surface on your design. And when it's combined with some satin stitches and various kinds of other yarn, like the metallic yarn that's in here, it's very pretty, it's very effective, and it's kind of fun. It does take a little while, and it takes a bit of thread to do it. Another example is this, that was considered a door hanger, and this is another one where this rose is in thread velvet, and it's really a pretty pink, even though my camera makes it look orange. I don't know why, but you can see that there are sections of this one where it's just like a pattern fill, but then there are sections of it that are the thread velvet that really look really elegant, I think. And then there's one built into the Viking machine. There's a few more thread velvet designs, and one of them is this caterpillar, and he ends up with a really fuzzy body. And I ended up making him into a little door hanger where it says, I looked in the mirror and I saw a butterfly. Okay, Liz is back. All right. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sending.
Thank you.
Okay, I sent you some designs. And the intent was to send you some small designs that you could use to just practice the thread velvet. You got one that's called Blue, and this is the sample of it, where all of the little flowers, or at least some of the flowers are all thread velvet, and then the rest of them have a satin stitch outer part with a thread velvet inner part for this one. This one is, the name of this one that you got is Pink, and it's two colors for the leaves, if you will, and then a little vine that it's on. And then the one that I would like us to stitch out together today in class is called Flower. And This is what it looks like before it's cut. It's just a rather thick satin stitch looking, but you'll notice that when you look at it very closely, there are running stitches around the edge, and that helps to hold those fibers when you cut it. I also recommend that after you have cut it and the fibers have, quote, bloomed, that you put some kind of fabric glue on the back of it, just to make sure that they don't, especially if it's something that's going to be handled or even laundered, you want to use that extra measure of security to keep those fibers from pulling out, even though they have that running stitch around the edge.
Judy?
Yes, ma'am.
So that one's pretty obvious, but I've had difficulty sometimes identifying, like, especially in the rows, where are the places to cut? Do you have a trick, or am I missing something on, on how to decide where are the parts you're supposed to cut and where are the parts you're supposed to not cut?
The only way I know to decide that is to watch it stitch out. And when it's putting many layers of thread on a particular area, that's the area you're going to cut. Okay, like, yeah, the rows was a challenge because the thread velvet parts, like here, would come down to a very narrow satin stitch. So as it was stitching out, if I could watch it and remember, where it was putting the multiple layers of thread, that was my clue as to where I needed to cut it, or I wanted to cut. Because, I certainly didn't want to cut these little skinny satin stitches, which actually, it's a part of the same leaf that is the thread velvet. And you're right, it's a challenge sometime to decide what you're supposed to cut and what you're not. So I'm sorry, but I don't have a cut and dried answer for that.
And then some of the patterns I've done, we had a different color thread for that part. Is
Yes.
that not possible?
Not always, because, like the rose, it's the same color thread. It's just, the only way I know is to, watch it stitch out and look for the places that are overstitched and end up being very thick. Like on this little one where you got the design and it's named blue, the outside part here is it's just a flat satin stitch, whereas the middle part was a, very thick, and like you said, Lee, it was two colors more than the outside part, which was just one color, which was not to be cut. There's I'm sorry, there's no easy way to know.
Well, at least I know, that I wasn't missing something because I was sitting there trying to figure it out. So if you're going to do it on something really special, you better make a sample, because it's easier once you have the sample, right? That if it looks like you want it to look.
Right.
And you didn't cut something you shouldn't have.
The other thing you can do is to take it into your software and watch it in the design player and, you know, maybe print it out, and then on your printout, mark it where it's putting the multiple layers of thread.
That's a good idea, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so there are built-in designs. Let me step back 1 second here. The threads that work the best are rayon threads. They will bloom much better than, say, polyester or cotton. That does not mean that you can't use the polyester threads or the cotton threads to do your thread velvet design. It's just that the rayon threads do a much better job of blooming than other threads. Okay, so that's, you know, I have used rayon thread for all of these ones that I have done. Okay, so let's see. If we go to, oh, it's not going to do it for me. Excuse me a second here. I thought I was going to be smart and have something all set up and ready, but not happening. Okay. All right. So if we want to go to find our help information in the machine, and we go to the techniques and tutorials, and we go to embroidery techniques, under surfaced embroidery, we have thread velvet. And again, we have a little tutorial for it that tells us about it. And we also have our content screen, and it shows us the designs that are built in to the machine that are thread velvet designs. And you can see the rose design is in there. And this number 8 is the one that was the door hanger that I showed you first. This little guy right here, which I think is a really pretty design. And this number 9 design down here, if you go to the Pfaff website and go to the inspiration section, there is an instruction for making a holiday thread velvet pillow. And it uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of this number 9 design to make this thread velvet pillow, which I think would be really, really elegant. It would take lots of thread. The finished size of the pillow is 21, and why they did it this way, 21 30-seconds by 8 and 21 30-seconds. Why they couldn't have made it 3/4, I don't know. Anyhow, they did it in centimeters and then converted it to inches, but it's pretty straightforward instructions, and it would be a super elegant pillow. So you can go to the Pfaff website and find that under the inspiration, and it was, if you there's a search field there that you can type in thread velvet, and it will give you all the projects that use thread velvet. It also gives you any project that has the word thread in it. So after the first page, most of them are not thread velvet. Okay, so if we wanted to do, you know, one of these designs, you can just bring it up, and when you look at the colors, let me go to stitch out so it shows you all the colors instead of just. Okay, so to do that design, there are 10 different colors. And as you go through them, the first one is doing the flowers and part of that same thing. And then the second one you can see is stitching over what it stitched first. So that's kind of a clue that that's something that you want to cut. And then let's see, let me go back. Color one. Oh, color one was the satin stitching. Okay, then color two is part of the flowers, and color three is the same area as color two. So color four and color five are on the same areas. And you can then, color six is a different area. 7 and 8 are the same, so that's a place you would cut. 9 and 10 are the same, so you would, those areas that you're getting more than one color of thread in would be places that you would want to cut once your design was finished. Does that make sense and in any way help?
Oh, yeah, that's great. I never, I didn't think of using that feature to easily find out.
Yeah, and sometimes on a very simple design, they might not use two colors, but in general, they will use two colors for the places that you're going to cut. And
so Judy, can it be like number 3? I think it was number 2.
number 2 is this one.
Number 2 and number 3.
3 is the same areas.
And that's where you'd cut?
And those are the areas that you would cut.
Okay.
See,
even though it's not showing the same.
It's this flower, and it's this flower, and it's this part of the stem.
And it's not the same, not necessarily always going to be the same color because they put some shading or something in there.
Well, your shading comes from using the two colors, and the first color is going to end up on the inside when you cut it, and the top color is going to end up being the outside when you cut.
Okay.
Okay, so like this one is a very pale lavender or purple, and the inside is a very dark purple. So the dark purple was stitched down first, and then the lighter color was stitched on top.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. In the
Judy?
case of the, yeah, go ahead.
Can you reverse these designs?
Mirror them.
Yes.
Let's go back to, we have to do that in embroidery edit. And get out of color block, and let's go away. Edit. And first off, select the design. Yes. You can rotate them. I don't know that you really want to try to resize them. That might, definitely you would not want to scale them.
Right.
You would want to use the resize function so that it added or took away stitches. You wouldn't just want to stretch or shrink it. and leave the same number of stitches. And there are bunches and bunches and bunches of these guys on the My Sewnet library. And I'll show you one of those in a minute, okay? But first, I wanted to show you, and if I can get Mr. Camera to, whoops, he's got kind of a weak neck today. Cut your designs. You do not, even though at the very last part of our project for today, they say use a knife or a seam ripper. You do not want to use a seam ripper to cut designs. What you want to use is like an X-Acto knife or a scalpel, and you want it to be very, very sharp. And I've got two different kinds here. This one is not as sharp as I would like it to be. Obviously, I've used it to rip out some embroideries, but this one is working well. And what you want to do is, let's see, how close can I get without this thing floating away? I like to cut from the outside to the inside so I don't accidentally cut over the end and cut any of those straight stitches, those running stitches that are helping hold my velvet stitches down. So, and I like to take it, not try to cut through everything all at once. So I would just slice it down the middle and stop, and then take my knife and see, kind of push what I've cut aside to see, did I cut, as much as I want? Well, in this case, I didn't, so I'm going to cut a little more and carefully try to cut the little end ones. Just take it a little bit at a time, just going a little deeper each time. And when you can see some of the background fabric, then it's a good place to stop. And you can take your knife and kind of fluff it up, and it will bloom more as it sits, or you can take your steam iron and hold it above it. Don't set your iron down on it because that'll smash it, but let the steam penetrate those fibers that you cut, and it will help it to bloom. Okay, any questions on that one? Okay.
Can you wash these designs? Or
I would say that you would need to be very careful. I wouldn't just throw them in the washer. I would certainly glue the back of it with, my preference is fray block. There's other fabric glues out there. You can, let's see. This one would work, the fabric fuse, to put on the back of it, and just make sure that, because on the back you're seeing a lot of the, you're still seeing some of the top threads, but you're seeing a lot of the bobbin threads. So I would put some kind of freight. To me, fray check often turns white when you put it on something like black, but fray stop does not, or fray block does not. And this fabric fuse is a much thicker glue, and it's not going to soak through as much as like Fray Check or Fray Block does. But I would opt for treating it much like you would velvet, because you've got all these little short fibers, and hopefully you're not going to rough it up so much that you pull them loose. It's like if you've ever had a chenille sweater, one of those really soft, fuzzy sweaters, and they recommend that you hand wash it. That's what I would recommend with something like this.
Judy,
Yes, Mrs. Liz.
you know that centipede that's on the samples?
Yes.
Well, I did the centipede. I put it on a pocket, on a t-shirt, and it gets washed all the time, and it's still there.
Okay. Did you put some glue on the back of him?
I don't remember.
That
I don't
okay, but I appreciate you telling us that.
But I put it on, it was kind of cute, so I stuck it on a pocket. You know, and then I put it on his t-shirt.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he is kind of cute.
Yeah. Okay, but it's been washed. It's been washed quite a few times.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay.
All right, just you wash it carefully, right?
No, I throw it in the washing machine with the rest of the stuff.
Okay. Okay.
I don't
All right.
do things carefully anymore. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. So, all right. So I thought you would like to see a camera that didn't fall all over the place. Here, stop. Quit there. Okay. Would like to see one of them stitch out, and let me delete this and go back to my design that I was going to stitch out as a sample, and which I hope you will stitch out also as a practice. I'm going to use the flower one that I sent you, and I'm putting it in a 120 by 120 hoop. And in the project for today, they recommended that use wash away copper on your fabric to keep the threads from sinking into the fabric. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put a piece of wash away topper on top of my fabric in my hoop, and then I'm going to stitch out this little flower. And it uses 2 colors, and I am using rayon thread for it. So without further ado, stop. Yeah, on there. So it's on the second layer now. And it does those running stitches after each layer. So that's third layer. And it's putting the 4th layer on now. And running stitches. And it's wadding. It's not being happy. What it's doing, I don't know. said I had threads underneath. Ouch. I'm going to go back and okay. All right, it stitched that first one, and so if I switch to the second one, hopefully, I don't know what it's going to do. Let's see if I can, rather than stitching out the whole thing. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, was not. It's interesting because it doesn't want to stitch out the right. Come on, come on. There. Okay. I want to get it to a place where it's going to stitch the second color over the first one, and it obviously didn't start with the same place with the second color. Come on. All right. I'll try this. Okay, so it did 4 layers of the first color and 2 layers of the second color. So now if I cut this, I have my lighter pink, which is my second color, on the outside, and my darker pink, which you can't see, on the inner part of it. So that's, you know, that's what happens as it's stitching out. It's going to lay down the first color and then put the second color right over top of it. And that ends up with like 6 layers of thread in one spot. Okay. Does that help in any way to see it actually stitch something out? Mary?
I just said, yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
Normally, I'm, you know, off changing threads and stuff, not paying attention to the stitching out.
Yeah, I don't I don't know why it was being naughty to start with, but hopefully you get the idea about it. As far as the instructions on thread velvet, there is on page 5 of your handout, there is a section called thread tips. And one of the tips is that if you slow your machine down, because it's putting so many layers in there, that could help. And the second one, you want a stitch ripper that will slice down through the layers, not up. Don't use a traditional seam ripper because you're going to be pulling up to cut the threads, and you could just pull them right out of the fabric. If you accidentally cut too deep, then you can either use some fabric glue or a fusible piece of stabilizer to repair the cut in your base fabric. And this I mentioned before about applying fabric glue to the wrong side of the stitch area. Another thing that I mentioned was that the rayon thread blooms the best. You can use polyester or cotton, but rayon is going to give you the better velvet look. And because thread velvet builds up a lot of thread, like 6 layers or so, you have the best results if you use your regular embroidery foot rather than the little plastic embroidery foot, because it is going to hop. And if you have a lighter weight bobbin thread than the one that we traditionally use, you're going to get a lot of bobbin thread because you got a lot of top thread. So for all your stitches on the top, you're going to have that many stitches and layers of bobbin thread on the back. So if you can get a bobbin thread that's lighter weight, and the lighter weight means a bigger number. Our embroidery thread is normally 40 weight, and our bobbin thread is probably a 60 weight, which means that it's thinner than the 40 weight. So if you had one that was, as they suggest, an 80 or a 90, that would even be thinner bobbin thread. But I'm not knowing where you would find the thinner bobbin thread, and I have used just the regular bobbin thread and not really had any problems with that. And here they say that thread velvet always has 2 colors. Well, I'm not sure that that's always true, but for the most case, I think it is. And again, they say it takes some time for the thread to fluff or bloom, and you can enhance it or encourage it to bloom faster if you shoot some steam into it rather than just cutting it and leaving it sit. Okay, any questions about any of those? Okay, I thought the project for this class was pretty neat.
What about the next 2? The next 2 tips.
Oh,
Cutting the layers. It talks about not cutting that first, at least how I'm interpreting it, not cutting that first lay down of stitches, not going all the way to the fabric.
I
But
try to
sometimes,
not go all the way to the fabric, but it's really hard to know where that, when you're cutting, if you're, I'm sorry, I didn't turn the page.
right, I know it's hard, but I was thinking that it kind of implies that first stitch out shouldn't be cut at all. So
Well,
is that, and I always usually like the look of it to get as much of the thread as possible.
let's see what I did here. Let's see. Well, this one, obviously, I have gone all the way down to the fabric, and you can see, if I pull it apart, you can see the black fabric underneath the stitches. which if it really is pulled apart, you can see. On this one, I did not cut all the way down to the back black fabric, and I would say it depends. One thing it depends on is the width, you know, how wide your satin stitches are, because if they're very short, then they're not going to stand up and pull apart as much as if they're long ones. And I can show you that on the project for today. This is the design that I did for the project. And here I tried not to cut. These are fairly long stitches, and these are shorter stitches, so it's easier to not see. Now on that one, I did cut all the way to the green, and my preference is not to not cut that very bottom layer if at all possible, but I find it very difficult to not cut it. You know, you have to really go slowly and work your way down to it when you're cutting. You can't just take a big slice and their comment is, if the fabric is high contrast, touch up with a colored permanent fabric marker. Well, if in the case where it's darker, a fabric marker or, you know, a Sharpie is not gonna be of any help to you. So if possible, yes, don't cut that bottom layer, but I find that difficult to not do.
Yeah, it's hard to tell when you hit it. Okay, thanks.
Okay. And yes, you can digitize your own designs. I haven't tried that, but I think that could be a challenge to do it.
I think a long time ago we did a little one in Janie's class, because you had to make sure you went around and did those anchoring stitches and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, but I never tried it on my own.
Well, I haven't either, so maybe that's something we could put on our bucket list. Okay. Anyhow, there's some interesting parts to the project today, and if I can back off far enough and get this where you can see it. This is my project for today. Okay, this design, and I'll show you on the machine in a minute, is a thread velvet design that is on my Sew-net library, and I have only cut half of it, and I did steam it so that it would bloom, but I thought it would be interesting for you to see some that was not cut as well as some that was cut. And this is the leg, a part of a leg off of a pair of jeans that I turned into this, what are they calling it? A gift or a wine bag. And it took quite a while to stitch out. I used like a full bobbin and another half of a bobbin to stitch it out. And then what I found interesting and informative in the instructions was the buttonholes that are done to lace the ribbon through for the tie on the bag. So I'd like to go to the part of, first off, I'll show you the design that I hacked up, and you definitely can take designs from the My Sew-net library and pardon the expression, but hack them up so you can use them, just parts of them, which is what I did. So if I bring up my, let's see, where are we? Okay. If I bring up my Sewnet on my screen and I bring up the library folder, which is where designs from my Sewnet library ends up. Come on. There we go. Let's get the right size hoop here. This design was intended for the turnable hoop. So this is the design I started with. And I brought it in and I kept taking away pieces until I ended up with just this, which is this. You can see these little corner pieces here and the little flower-like parts and the center part. The rest of it I deleted, and come on. I want you to, come on, delete all. And what I ended up with, and let me get the right hoop, was that for my design. So I just kept deleting parts in the software until I had a part that was the size that I wanted. And that's what I ended up stitching out. Now, the comment that was made that thread velvet always has two colors. These corner pieces are all the same color, even though they are thread velvet and many, many layers of thread. And it's as you watch it stitch out, you can tell that they've gone over it many times to do those colors. Oh, pooey. And I also was able to combine my colors using the software, so it still stitched it out like half of it and then the other half of it. But I could combine the colors in the software so that all of one color would stitch out at the same time. So all of the dark colors in all of the layers are stitching out first, and then the base layer, which I used the dark pink for, stitched out next, and then the light pink stitched out over top of the dark pink. And again, there were, just like that little flower petal that I stitched out, there were 4 layers of the dark thread and then just 2 layers of the light thread on top of it. So it was interesting to watch stitch out. And then these little squares here are actually even thread velvet. And I thought, wow, that was going to be impossible, but they bloomed quite nicely. And I'm happy with it. Okay. To do any comments or questions on that part?
Very pretty.
Pardon, Mary?
Your design turned out gorgeous, I think. Thanks.
It was kind of a challenge to figure out because it was listed on my Sewnet library as Victorian velvet, and putting it on a green piece of denim, I thought, what colors would I use, but it turned out okay. And in the project, they used this design for their gift bag. And I've used that before, so I wanted to use something different. And I wanted to see how much I could adapt a design from the library. Okay, so let's get
Judy?
out of here. Yes.
If you wanted to put the fabric fuse on the back of the design so you could wash it, would you do that before you cut it?
No.
So you
I
do it
would
after
not,
you've cut it?
because I would be concerned that it would wick into the fibers that I wanted to cut and bloom. So I would cut first, and I have not put any kind of glue on my project that I did. First off, I'm not done cutting, and I want to cut first and then put my glue on to know that I'm not gonna keep myself from being able to cut what I want.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to clarify.
That's fine. I appreciate that. Okay.
Excuse me, what about putting an iron-on fusible interfacing on it, on the back before you
I
start?
don't think an iron-on fusible is going to have enough adhesive that's going to get through remember, you've got as many layers of bobbin thread as you have top thread on here, and I think you want something that's going to penetrate most of those layers.
Okay.
And I don't think your iron-on is only going to get the very top layers that you're gluing it to, if you will. All right?
Yep.
Okay. So let me clear this, and I want to go to the instructions for putting your design on the bag are very good. They're very detailed. The one thing that is not mentioned is that most jean legs are tapered, and either the front or the back is larger than the other one. So basically, I didn't just open one seam and then use the rest of the leg as it was. I cut them so they were the same size and restitched a straight seam cutting off the taper so that my bag was the same width from top to bottom. Okay, so I didn't see anything in the instruction about, you know, making it a straight seam. And maybe the jeans that whoever wrote the instructions, maybe their jeans were straight legged. This particular one that I happened to have was not. So I made it to be the same width all the way up and down. Okay. So on page, let's see, there we go. Okay, on page 5, about a third of the way down is the title Buttonholes. Okay. The instructions had us draw a line across from the hem of the fabric, like 2.5 inches down. And that's the center line for our buttonholes and flowers on excuse me. And it says to measure across the pant leg, across the line you drew, And there in blue it says mine measured approximately 12 inches or 305 millimeters. Yours may differ from mine. Well, mine measured more than 12 inches, and I ended up using 290 for my sizing, and which I'll show you in a minute, rather than the 305, because the seam that was open, I wanted the same spacing when I sewed that seam up as between my buttonholes that I had between the buttonholes on the rest of it to make it look nice. So I made sure that the end of my buttonholes allowed for the seam allowance and then a little bit of space so they looked even when I sewed that seam up and compared it to the rest of the the buttonhole spacing on it. Does that make sense? I didn't want my buttonhole to be right up against my seam. I wanted it to be spaced like all of the rest of them. So you can kind of futz with the length of it, and you do need to know what it is in millimeters. So if you have a tape measure that has inches and millimeters both, that's a good help. All right, so first off on page 5,
Penny,
go ahead.
why do you have to have it in millimeters?
Because that's how you're gonna, well, unless your machine is set in inches.
Okay, all right, yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So no, you don't have to have it in millimeters, but it's good to millimeters to me are more exact, but you could use, if you set your machine in inches, you could use inches.
So you
Okay.
just have to have it, you have to do it however you use however you've got your settings set.
Right. However you have your machine set for, whether it's metric or inches. Okay, so she asked us to select the 360 by 200 hoop. It so happens that I do have a 360 by 200 hoop, so I was able to use that. But if you don't, you could use the 360 by 260 hoop. What you need is the length of the 360, because remember she said she used 305. So we need the 360 for the length. Okay, once you have selected that hoop, then you're going to load a stitch, and we want to get a buttonhole, and that is in 1.3, number 9 buttonhole, and that comes in our hoop. And then we want to go to Shape Creator. Okay, when we go to Shape Creator, then we are going to pick our shape by touching the star and the circle of that one. And we want to go to the basic shapes, and down here at the very bottom there is a line, and that's what we want, is to select the line. And then we want to go to the embroidery designs, not stitches, embroidery designs, and go to our minis. And the instructions say to select design 76, which I didn't think was very attractive and didn't go with the larger design that I had on mine. The 76 is kind of like a sunburst, I ended up using, what did I use? Hello, where's my little flower? Whoopsie, there he is. I ended up using number 59, which is a little 4-petaled flower with little dots in between the petals. So that was the one I used. And when you bring that in on your screen, you have the buttonhole at one end of your line and your flower or whatever you decide to use at the very other end of your line. Then when you've got those two designs in, you want to go to Edit, still in Shape Creator, and you want to rotate your lines 90 degrees so it's up and down, because that's how you're going to stitch it. Then we need to get it to be the size that we want, and we're going to go to the scale icon, which is this top row, the second one from the left. And I tried doing exactly what she said, and maybe this is something different between the icon and the icon 2. But if I tried to put in 305 and say okay, it did not change the size of my line. However, if I unlock in my control wheel and I now put in, and I actually used 290 on mine, it would resize it for me. So, Peggy, are you there?
Did you?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Could you resize yours without unlocking it?
I didn't try that yet. I'm stitching out one of those ones you gave us on the other one.
Oh, okay.
I'll look, it's almost done and I can check it because I was wondering that myself.
Well, the first time I did it and it wouldn't change the size on me, I sat there with my finger on the up arrow until I got it to the size I wanted it. And that takes a little bit of time, but then I discovered that if I unlocked it, it would take the change.
Yeah, this one, it's almost done stitching out and I'll be able to do it because I started to do it and I thought, oh crap, I'm stitching something out.
Okay, that's okay. When you let us know when you find out, okay?
Okay.
All right, so now we're going to just, yes?
I think when you put in a number, it doesn't like it unless you put a decimal in there.
I tried that too.
I just did it on mine and it worked. I put 305 decimal.
And nothing behind the decimal?
Nothing behind it, but.
Okay, well, that's something else that we can try, because I thought I tried that last night and it.
Yeah, because I know if I wanted like, 0.5 or something like that, I always had to put the 0 in to get the 0.5, but.
Right.
I just tried it and it worked, but.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we have more than one way to skin a cat, or to change the length of our line. Okay. All right, so once you got your line the length that you wanted, then we can say okay. And that isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to Shape Creator, and I may just have blown this. Okay. Oh, okay, was on the pad. All right, so okay. So now you have in the handout, it shows you the symbols or the icons for the icon 1. If you have the icon 2 over here on the side, you have your numbers, your plus and your minus. Next to them are two icons. And the top one, quit hitting the camera. The top one says duplicate the last design. Okay, if we're going to duplicate the last design, it's going to be the flower. However, the icon below that, right next to the minus, no, I don't want to do that. If I hit the question mark and then I hit that symbol, it says repeat the combination. So I've got two designs in there. And if I'm repeating as I increase my numbers, it's going to alternate between my buttonhole and my flower. And you can have more than two designs and use this repeat combination. You could have three designs and it would repeat the first one, the second one, the third one as you increased your numbers. So we want to select, make sure that the one by the minus sign is selected down here. And then we want to hit our plus sign until we get to number 15. And you can see that it's adding buttonholes and flowers to my design here. Okay, so I'm on 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And the odd number is so that we have a buttonhole on each end. It's an odd number of designs, but we have an even number of buttonholes. And the comment is that you need to have, when you're lacing ribbon in and out, you need to have an even number of buttonholes in order to get it to end up right, so that where you start and you end, you've got, but your ribbon is going to come out so you could tie it together. So if you're doing buttonholes on something as a closure, always remember that you want an even number of buttonholes to do that. Okay. Okay, once you're up to 15, then we actually want to touch OK and go back to embroidery edit. Now, the flowers that are there, if we just used it like that, we would end up with probably a flower on the seam. Because remember, we have an open piece of fabric with a seam down the middle, so this flower is on the seam. So our next step is to go to the layers panel, which is your little stack of papers or fabric, whatever you want to call it, up here. And it shows everything as a complete design. And we want to separate that. So we're going to touch ungroup. And now everything is selected. And so we want to deselect them. And I deselected it by touching select multiple twice. And then I want to be able to select multiple. So I'm going to touch it again. And on page 7, it says we want to touch design number 4, and on the icon 1 it would turn to gray. On the icon 2 it turns orange. We want to select number 4, number 8, and number 12, and we want to go to edit, and we want to use the trash can to delete those selected designs. And it's going to say, is that really what you want to do? And we say yes. So now when we look at our design, we have every other space between our buttonholes is empty. And the reason for that being that the spaces where the flower is your ribbon is going to be behind those buttonholes. The spaces where there are no flowers, the ribbon is going to be on the outside of your bag. So you wouldn't want a flower underneath that ribbon. So that was, I thought was very clever to delete the ones that would be covered up by the ribbon. When you cinch it up, then, you know, you're seeing the flowers, but if there was a flower in between, it would be hidden. So I thought that was pretty smart. So now you're ready to stitch this out and make your, when you stitch it out, because my little flower has 3 colors and my buttonhole is a 4th color, when I go to stitch out, it tells me to sort them and then to merge them. So now it's going to stitch out all of my buttonholes first without me having to change the thread. And then it's going to stitch out the petals on my flower next. Then it's going to stitch out, there's a little cross line in that flower. It's going to stitch those out next. And then lastly, it will stitch out the little round balls that are on the flower. And I used the same colors that I used on my design for my little flowers. Okay. That was, I thought was a very neat part of the project instruction to show us how to evenly space buttonholes and to delete the little flowers that would get hidden with the ribbon when you cinched it up to tie it. And all in all, I thought it was a good project. And in here, she mentions that she did put the wash away topper on the denim when she stitched out her buttonholes. And then to cut buttonholes, you can use the Buttonhole Cutters. I happen to have a pair of, I can't find them at the moment, Buttonhole Scissors. If you've never heard of such a thing, there is such a thing, which I didn't think it was anything unusual because my grandma had some, my mom had some, so I have some. But the scissors look like this. There's a space here which you can reach over whatever you have to cut your buttonhole. Like if I'm cutting this buttonhole, then I can squish up my fabric and get down to my buttonhole where the actual blade starts. And then I can, there's a little screw on them that you can set so you can always have the same size and not cut too far with your buttonhole. So by changing the length of the screw, you can change the length of your cut, which is nice. So
yeah, that's clever.
yeah, and I had a pair which I think I gave to my nephew's wife that my grandmother had.
Oh, wow.
So, and you know, people look at me strange when I say buttonhole scissors, but they still make them. If you know, aren't a fan of that little chisel thing to cut your buttonholes, or to use a, put pins on either end, put a straight pin on either end and use a seam ripper to cut your buttonhole.
Yeah.
Well, and then you also get to make it whatever size you need it to be, instead of those punches are all one size, or that's what I've
Right.
seen.
So if you had if you were doing something where you needed a very, very small one, then you could just, that's, maybe 3/8 of an inch is the smallest. And you could set it, and you certainly wouldn't overcut, which is always a danger when you're using a seam ripper or one of those chisel things or a knife.
Right. So I've got an update for you on your resizing the shape.
I'm sorry?
I've got an update for you on resizing the shape.
Okay.
You have to have the shape horizontal like it came in for it to work. Because I just was trying to follow along, and I rotated the shape first to go up and down because I was going to make it long, and it wouldn't take it. But I put it back horizontally, and it worked great.
That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you rotate it.
And then I rotated it.
Huh. Okay. So even one more way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so anyway, that's,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
I appreciate that. I'm so glad when you're in class and you find different ways to do things and let us know.
Well, I was following along, and I rotated it, and then it wouldn't work. And I thought, well, no, I just did it.
I know.
I went back, and so whatever, that's how you do it. I don't know if that's the way it worked on the icon, because obviously I don't have the icon, so we'll have to.
Right. That's why I was asking Peggy, because she still has the icon.
Right, so she'll have to see if she can rotate it and then resize it.
And
Right.
I'm working on it right now.
Okay. One more thing that in somewhere on these instructions, on the very last page, on page 9, about halfway down, a little more than halfway down, and where she talks about sewing the bag back together, she says that she did trim her finished piece to about 15 inches tall. Well, I'm not sure if she's saying 15 inches before she sewed it together and boxed the corners, or 15 inches after it was, that it ended up being 15 inches tall after she sewed it together and boxed the corners. I cut mine about 17 inches before I sewed it up and boxed the corners. And it ends up being, let's see here. It ended up being right at 15 inches finished. And if I put my trusty little wine bottle in it, then it closes above the wine bottle. So, and again, it may depend on what, I know not all wine bottles are the same, or if you want to put a magnum of champagne or something in there, it might be different. So, anything else while we're here about this, or any questions, comments?
That was good. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I haven't used thread velvet other than to make samples and so forth, but I think it's a beautiful option. And
Yeah, I agree. It's very pretty.
I'm not too crazy about the fact that they have a thread velvet snake built into the Epic, but somehow that doesn't seem to fit because I don't think snakes are fuzzy. But
You need it for little boys. If you have little butterfly caterpillars for girls, you need a fuzzy snake for boys.
I think they could go with caterpillars.
Better on your machine than in
That's
your
just
yard.
me.
Okay, Judy,
Yes.
I was able to push when I got to the where it tells you to change the scale and you touch 305. I put 305 in and it changed it.
Okay, so there's a difference between the icon and the icon 2 then.
Yeah, and I didn't have to unlock it. I left
Okay.
the dial locked, and it did put 305 in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Peggy.
You had already rotated it, Peggy?
Is it supposed to be going horizontal or vertical?
Vertical.
No, let me rotate it and see what happens. I did it when it was it's vertical.
You did it when it was horizontal? Before you rotated it? Because it comes in horizontal.
It was horizontal before I rotated it, and I rotated it and touched the 305 or whatever it is, and it changed it.
Okay, so it was vertical when you changed it.
Yeah, how it comes in originally, it comes in vertical. Because I changed it to 90 degrees, and now it did change.
It should come in horizontal, going across your screen.
It did come in horizontal, then I changed it to 90 degrees, and it took it vertical, and then I put 305 in.
Okay, all right.
Enlarged it.
Okay.
All right.
So it's a difference in the two machines.
Yeah, I didn't have to unlock it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being our tester.
Took me a minute, but I got there.
That's okay. That's quite all right. Thank you so much for clarifying that for us. All right. So any other questions or comments or there will be workbook classes in August. There are no technique classes in August. But there will be workbook classes because they are, we're a day when the shop is not open and they're virtual, and Shop Hop will not be affected by us, or we won't be affected by them. So.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you all very much. Elizabeth Gomer, you got your handouts?
Yeah, I got them all, yes, and I got the designs.
Wonderful. Thank you,
And
Elizabeth, for sending them to her. And I will make sure that, I don't know what happened to her on my list, but I'll make sure she's back in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, because I did register.
Okay.
All right. I guess I'll see you guys on Friday.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Okay, bye. Hey,
Thanks,
Elizabeth, have a nice vacation. That sounds more fun than software anyway.
Now, wait a minute. Software is pretty much fun. It's just different.
But she's going,
This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, poop.
oh.